So in today's video, I'm going to show you a few key tricks for painting balloons and baskets, and we're going to use those to paint this simple hot air balloon scene in Procreate. As usual, the techniques I'm covering in this video are very general, but you can find the exact brushes I'm using listed in the description. So I'm going to start by painting the envelope first, and I've got a really interesting technique for that I think you'll like. So for the brush, I'm going to grab the smooth round, and I want to paint a sort of green and beige striped hot air balloon. And I'm going to start with the darker color first, which is the green. And I'm going to create a line, a pretty consistent line like this. Then I'm going to lift off my brush, and I'm going to go over it one more time. And I'm going to repeat that and create 5 evenly spaced parallel lines. Next, I'm going to create 4 beige lines that fill the spaces in between, but I want those to be on their own layer, and I'm going to place this layer below the green lines. And the technique is basically the same. I'm going to do 2 overlapping strokes. The only trick is though, I want to make sure there are no white gaps between the stripes. Now at this point, it doesn't look anything like a hot air balloon, but this is a good point to add some shadows. So for that, I'm going to make sure I've got the layer here with the green stripes selected. Then I'm going to grab the selection tool set to freehand. And I'm going to select just the right side of each of these green stripes. Then I'll reconnect it. I'll feather it out about 10%. Then I can go to hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'll just lower the brightness, and it's just messing with the selection we made and basically darkening the right side of each stripe. You could repeat this process for the lighter stripes, but I think it's not necessary. Next, I can finally move on and start shaping this into a balloon. So for that, I'm going to merge both stripe layers together onto one. Then I'm going to grab the arrow tool, set to distort, and I'm going to kind of pinch together the bottom here, and then I'll open up the top. There we go. Next, I want to kind of close the top of it. So for that, I'm going to go to my adjustments. I'm going to go to liquify and set it to push. You can copy my settings here. I think I'll set the size around 80%. And I'm going to kind of slide these colors together. I'm not going to close them completely. Then to clean up this top portion here, I'm going to grab the eraser brush, which is set to the fineliner pen. And I'm just going to round out the top and then erase all the excess. And at this point, once we've got the kind of rough shape of the balloon, we can finally inflate it and make it look full of air. So for that, I'm going to go to my adjustments again and go to liquify. But this time, I'm going to change it to expand. I'll set the size here to max. And I'm just going to carefully tap around on this just for a fraction of a second in these different places until it looks like it's full. And once it's inflated like this, it should look pretty good. But in this case, it turned out a little bit uneven. So I'm going to change over to push, shrink the size to around 80%, and I'll do my best to fix it. Now once the envelope is finished, I want to add a little bit of a skirt down here. So I'm going to shrink the overall size of the balloon so it fits better on my artboard. Then I'll make a new layer, and I'll choose some kind of color for the skirt. For the brush, I'm going to continue with the smooth round, and I'm just going to blob on the colors like this. And I'm trying to make it uneven because I like the texture. And then once I've covered that area, I can grab the eraser tool, still set to the fineliner pen, and I can use this to refine and shape the skirt. And once I'm happy with how all this looks, I'll merge them together onto one layer, and then make a new layer, and we can start painting the basket. And for that, I'll start by making a kind of background wash first. So once again, I'll grab the smooth round brush. I'll choose a medium khaki tone for the basket, and I'll try to make a pretty rough kind of wash like this. After that, I'll grab the eraser and I'll cut out the shape of the basket. Next, I'm going to add a rim and an opening. So I'll choose a darker color for the opening. I'm going to change my brush to the fineliner pen, and I'll just draw in a sort of rectangle shape like this. After that, I'll choose a much lighter version of this color, and I'll use that to make the rim. Now for the texture on the basket, it's super easy. I'm going to make a blank layer above it. I'll choose a darker version of our basket color. I'm still going to use the fineliner pen, just at a really small size. And I'm going to start by going around the rim of the basket, kind of at an angle like this. After that, on the body of the basket, I'm just going to do rows and rows of parallel lines. And once those lines are finished, I'm going to set the transparency mode of that layer to multiply. Then I'll lower the transparency to 0 and slowly raise it back up just until that pattern is barely visible. There we go. And once I'm happy with how it looks, I'll merge the pattern together with the basket. And with the basket finished, I want to attach it to the balloon by adding some lines, but there's a couple of small adjustments I want to make first. The first thing is, I want to kind of center the basket, so I'll just try to move it so it's really centered on the balloon. And the next thing I want to do is expand the bottom of the balloon, so the skirt here is about the same size as the basket. So I'm going to select the balloon layer, grab the arrow tool set to warp, and I'm just going to stretch the bottom until the apron there is wide enough. There we go. And with those adjustments finished, we can add some ropes connecting the basket. So for that, I'll make a blank layer above everything. I'm going to choose a sort of warm medium gray tone. I want the ropes to be a little bit scratchy, so I'm going to go to the drawing tab and use the little pine brush. And I'm just going to draw some straight lines using the snapping feature in Procreate. And that looks really good, but I think the lines are too dark. And that's because if you zoom in here, they're sort of blending in with the basket and there isn't a lot of contrast. This is really easy to fix. I'm just going to make sure the line layer is selected. Then I can go to hue, saturation, and brightness and just adjust those lines until they stand out nicely. Another detail you might want to add is some ropes or netting around the balloon, and this is really easy to do. I'm going to make another blank layer above everything. I think I'll choose a light olivey green tone for this. I think that looks pretty good. And I'm just going to draw some kind of 45-degree angle lines like this, and I'll probably have to draw maybe 10 of them to cover the whole balloon. There we go. After that, I'm just going to duplicate that layer, grab the arrow tool, and then mirror it. There we go. Next, I'll merge both of those layers together so all the lines are on one layer. Then I'm going to grab the eraser and clean up all the excess lines I don't need. Now on the balloon itself, I recommend just erasing them straight across like this. Then you can grab your brush again, which is still set to the little pine in this same color, and you can just draw a bold line straight across like this to connect everything. Now just for fun, I'm going to speed through and just add a handful of kind of spontaneous details. I'm just continuing on this same layer, and I'm doing all this with the little pine brush. And there we go, all these details look really good, but there's one more thing I almost forgot. I want to add a shadow on the basket to make it look more three-dimensional. So for that, I'm going to make sure the basket layer is selected. Then I can grab the selection tool set to freehand. And I'm just going to make a selection like this. I'll reconnect it, hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just darken that area. And at this point, the illustration could be done, but I want to show you really quickly an easy way to paint some clouds. So for that, I'll make a blank layer above everything. I'm going to use a sort of bluish gray tone like that. And for the brush, I'm going to use the abstract round. And I'm just going to kind of swirl this around, and at the same time, I'm varying the pressure quite a bit. The pressure with this brush is strongly connected with the opacity, so by varying the pressure while we're swirling it, we can create a sort of fluffy, layered appearance. And I think 4 clouds is enough. To finish these up, I recommend slightly darkening the bottom of each one. So for that, I'm going to grab the selection tool set to freehand, and I'm going to make a selection like this. I'll reconnect it. I'll feather it out around 10%. Hue, saturation, and brightness. And the trick with this is, first raise the saturation up to max, and then start lowering the brightness, just until you can barely see this kind of burned edge effect happening. There we go. I don't want it to be too dark because it'll look like a storm cloud. And I'm just going to repeat this process on each cloud. And just like that, this illustration is finished. This is probably one of the simplest types of hot air balloons you can paint. If you're trying to make a more intricate classical design, I recommend using a reference image to help you with all the ropes and how they connect to the basket. Please give this video a like if you think I've earned it, and here are 2 more whimsical style illustration tutorials I think you'll love to watch next.